This is a North American F-108 Rapier. This is a McDonnell Douglas F-4C Phantom II. And this is the Douglas DC-8 jetliner. What do these three diverse aircraft have in common? Let's find out on Celebrating Aviation with Mike Machat, by request. I want to thank you, the viewers, for some wonderful suggestions contained in nearly 200 comments on the earlier version of this program. What these three diverse aircraft have in common is they are among the most aesthetically beautiful airplanes ever designed. And this is part two of a two-part episode. Part one is we'll have a link at the end of this video, as well as a link in the title block if you missed that. In that episode, we had a top 10 list of beautiful airplanes, but now we're going to show you more beautiful airplanes of all different types. And as we did the first time, we assembled an esteemed group of highly experienced aviation experts. And we now have the Celebrating Aviation with Mike Machat Platinum Advisory Committee. And we have a photo of the committee about to board a flight. There they are. Extra credit if you can guess that airplane. Let's begin with some military aircraft. I was asking about an albatross. No, not this albatross. No, not this albatross either. Yes, this one. World War I. Just an amazingly streamlined machine for that era. More amazing when you consider that the Wright B Flyer was evaluated by the U.S. Army in 1907. Take a good look at this airplane and compare it to this in just 10 years later. Other German aircraft to look at, the Focke-Wulf TA-152, done in a beautiful painting by my friend Jerry Crandall. And my paintings of the ME-262 and ME-163, the first jet and rocket aircraft to be used in combat, respectively. The Curtiss P-40 Warhawk, an interesting airplane and beloved by anyone who flew it. And we have this gentleman here, Joe Engel, who was an astronaut, flew the X-15, was a fighter pilot, and was inspired to his career by the Flying Tigers. And when he got to fly his dream airplane, the P-40, he said it was hands down his favorite warbird. We have the beautiful North American F-86 Sabre, the epitome of the air superiority fighter in the early 1950s. It's one of those airplanes that looks good from any angle. And of course, the beautiful 35-degree sweepback on the wings is just a real classic. And I should mention that Chuck Yeager, Pete Everest, Bob Hoover, and Buzz Aldrin all picked the F-86 as their favorite airplane. Another aircraft powered by the same engine as the F-86, the GE J-47, and flew the same year as the F-86 in 1947, the Boeing B-47 Stratojet. A very significant airplane seen in this beautiful painting by my friend Craig Cadera. And the B-47 pioneered a number of revolutionary engineering aspects for aircraft, potted engines mounted on pylons below a sleek laminar flow wing, the use of large airframe structural methodology for construction. And Chief Test Pilot Tex Johnston for Boeing considered the B-47 one of, if not the most significant aircraft of the 20th century, because all of its design features became the template for the Boeing 707 airliner and just about all the aircraft commercially flown today. Here's an unmanned airplane that I consider quite beautiful, the Vought Regulus, grandfather of the American modern cruise missile. And this was flown in the 1950s to be launched from submarines. But wait a minute, I have a better picture of the Regulus. Yeah, that's more like it. And you see landing gear. This was a test version of the missile so that it could be recovered and systems could be developed in the early 1950s. Two beautiful British airplanes to look at, the Hawker Hunter and Hawker Seahawk, in that classic flat aluminum finish, very 1950s from the United Kingdom. The North American F-100 Super Sabre, first of the Century series, the first operational supersonic airplane. Just a really elegant shape. This is what it would look like if you were flying with the Thunderbirds. We have the North American XF-108 Rapier, which was a program designed to augment the North American B-70 as a high-speed interceptor. It never made it past the mock-up stage, but a very elegant-looking airplane. This is my personal favorite, the Lockheed C-141 Starlifter. I know it's odd to consider a transport as an elegant, beautiful aircraft, but the lines of the C-141, the high tail, just a very majestic looking airplane. I have quite a bit of time inside them in my time in the Air Force, and it was just a really excellent aircraft. Now we have the Lockheed F-16 Fighting Falcon. Really beautiful airplane. It went by many names. It was considered the Viper by its pilots. It was called the Electric Jet because it was the first operational Air Force aircraft with a digital flight control system. And the lawn dart, why would you call it a lawn dart? Oh, I see. Okay. The Northrop YF-23 was a beautiful aircraft, informal nickname, the Black Widow II, but it lost the fly-off competition to the Lockheed F-22, which is the frontline fighter in the Air Force today. Two Navy jet seaplanes, the Convair Sea Dart and Martin Seamaster. Interesting concepts at that time in the early days of the Cold War, but neither aircraft went into production. And here's one that did, the North American A3J or RA-5C Vigilante, seen here, taking off from a carrier. And just a beautiful airplane from just about any angle, like the F-86. We're going to look at some airliners. And I've always considered the Comet 1 the essence of the design, a very elegant-looking airplane. The Douglas DC-8 jetliner came in two versions, really. The original short body that you see here, Ship 1, and the extended stretch 250-passenger Super 60 series. This is the 63, also very effectively used as a freighter and re-engined again in the 1980s for extra service life. The Lockheed 10 Electra, beautiful airplane, as is its later brother, the Lockheed L-188 Electra. And of course, the L-1011 TriStar, beautiful wide-body three-engine jet, first flew in the early 1970s. My personal favorite, I kind of lean toward the 1011-500, the shorter fuselage, longer range version. And here you see the number 2 engine, which is beautifully fared into the tail cone, and it's fed by the S duct that you see there on the intake above the fuselage. This is a very sophisticated piece of structure compared to the McDonnell Douglas DC-10 or KC-10 tanker that you see here. And the tanker version was made possible by the simpler, what they call a flow-through nacelle for its number 2 engine that you see there. But when you look at the early Boeing airliners, the 707, they were quite beautiful, but very angular. Look at the lines and compare them to the more aquatic-looking jets of today, which we're going to see in a moment. The 757, first all-glass cockpit airliner, and its brother, the 767, a common type rating for both pilots. The 747-8 series, the last one produced, had, again, the beginnings of a very aquatic look to it, very futuristic-looking airplane. And now we come to the Airbus A350, which is my personal vote for the most aesthetically beautiful, large, long-range airliner flying today. Look at the curvature on those wings. It's really beautiful. Let's look at some aircraft from civil aviation. We begin with the Hughes R1 Racer. This is a one-of-a-kind airplane, set world records cross-country, flown by Howard Hughes himself. It's on display at the National Air and Space Museum on the Mall in Washington, D.C. If you ever get to see it, the workmanship is just stunning. The cantilever wing without a strut Cessna 190 series represented, futuristic-looking aircraft after World War II. We have the Grumman Mallard, beautiful amphibious aircraft built by Grumman in Long Island, New York. And this particular Mallard was owned by the New York Daily News and used as a camera plane. It has a Dutch door in the aft fuselage. You see the crew member climbing the ladder there, and the door was split in two halves, and the upper half could be opened in flight for a cameraman. Now, I want to talk about this airplane in particular because it was based at New York's Zahns Airport. You see you can actually see it there on the right side of that photo. This is an airport out in Amityville, Long Island, on the South Shore, and it was used as a camera plane. On the morning of July 25th, 1956, this airplane launched from Zahns and was one of the aircraft that filmed the sinking of the Andrea Doria. The Beech V-35 Bonanza, the longest continuously produced aircraft in history. First flew in 1947 with the butterfly tail. It's being produced today with a conventional tail, but a timeless aircraft, really elegant looking airplane for its era. Speaking of which, we have two racing airplanes represented in artwork here. At top, we have the Bugatti P100, and at bottom, the DH-88 Comet. The Cessna 310, for you Sky King fans, and its older brother with the swept tail and canted tip tanks, the 320 Sky Knight. Speaking of 20, the Dassault Falcon 20, beautiful bizjet, first generation. And as you may know, this was the airplane chosen by a gentleman named Fred Smith, who started this little startup freight airline back in the early 1970s with a concept of flying freight overnight from one point to another using a central hub. I think that turned out pretty well. And we come to what were suggested as ugly yet beautiful. I'm going to call them brutish yet beautiful airplanes. Let's take a look. We have the Saunders Roe SR-A1, the first jet flying boat. The McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom. The McDonnell Douglas AV-8B Harrier, which is a U.S. adaptation of the British Harrier for the U.S. Marine Corps. The Lockheed AC-130 Spectre gunship. And of course, the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II, actually the Warthog. The Panavia Tornado. And you can't leave out the Boeing B-52 Stratofortress, currently under testing with new Rolls-Royce engines. This is going to possibly be the first military aircraft to be flown for 100 years in service. The Grumman F-14 Tomcat looks good from many different angles, but check out this view. Swing wing jet fighter. And replaced by the McDonnell Douglas FA-18 Hornet and Super Hornet today. And look at the airplane in this view and compare it to this. Now you know why they named it after an insect. So, the most aesthetically beautiful airliner ever designed. Well, in part one, we chose the Concorde, or I should say Concorde. You don't use the word the. But for part two, we had a tie between the Lockheed 1049G, or Super G Connie, and the Lockheed 1649 Starliner. So after exhaustive study and evaluation, our judges came up with the winner, the Super G with tip tanks, the quintessential 1950s prop airliner. There it is on its postcard for TWA. And if you notice that line at the bottom, use your camera, remember your trip with pictures. What's a camera? Most aesthetically beautiful military airplane ever flown. For part one, we chose the Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird. And for part two, the Rockwell B-1B Lancer, swing wing supersonic bomber. Now, it's referred to as the B-1, nicknamed the Bone. You can see the shape here, but there's more to that story. It's the B-1. If you just spell out the number one, it becomes B-1, and if you remove the hyphen, it's the Bone. Pretty cool. I thought I'd take you up in this airplane. It's quite a machine. This is a photo taken out over near Edwards Air Force Base doing low-level terrain avoidance, and we're flying at 500 knots at 200 feet. And looking out the left cockpit window, there's our shadow. So there you have it, a look at more aesthetically beautiful airplanes. And I want to thank the great people who made this presentation possible, and also part one with great imagery and technical support. And thank you so much for celebrating aviation with Mike Machat. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't subscribed, we'd love having you on board. And please do hit the like button on the way out. It does help us with YouTube. As always, until next time, take care.